If you've ever tried to hide a group of objects with a trigger in Storyline, you probably noticed right away that it's not possible. But there are some ways that you can use grouped objects and triggers to create that effect of objects being hidden on your slide. You just have to work around the built-in functionality. So let's look at 6 ways that we can do it. So one way is to add a cover screen. So what I have right here is a white graphic, just a solid white graphic that matches the background color of my slide. If I come down here to the States tab, you'll see that it's set to hidden as the default or initial state, as we call it in Storyline. Cool. So this cover graphic remains over the grouped object, which is what we got right here from just a content library template. And when I click the first button right here, what we're telling it to do is change the state of that cover graphic to normal when user clicks. And that's a really fast way, when user clicks. And that's a really fast way to automatically hide something on the slide, assuming that the background is a solid color that makes it a lot easier, or if it is a pattern or texture, then you've aligned that part of the cover graphic to seamlessly fit with the background graphic. But a solid color is going to make this work really well. Another way you can work with hiding grouped objects is to take all of the grouped objects and put them inside of a single object. So in this case, if you look at this, this is all a grouped, what looks like a grouped object, but really it's, let me dive in here to the states, we placed all of the text items inside of that single icon state. So it's being treated now as a single object, and that's where you can easily add a single trigger to hide the icon, which in part will also hide the additional text. The downside here is that it makes it a little bit more work to edit the text because you have to edit the state each time, but that's probably one of the most efficient ways to hide a group of objects with a single trigger, because all we're doing right here for this button is changing the state of that icon, single object, right? Icon 2, notice how the other shapes still show up, but they're inside of that icon 2's state, normal state, which means they're automatically hidden. All right, let's look at another option right here for hiding it. So here's a group of objects. In this case, we actually used 3 separate triggers. Let me pull up this right here for button 3. We're using 3 triggers to hide each of the objects in the group. So this first trigger is hiding icon 3, which is this top graphic. And then the next trigger is going to hide the title text, right? And then also the body text. So we need 3 triggers to hide them. That's another valid way too, because those objects can still remain as groups on your slide, and you can quickly hide them with a single click as well. All right, a couple more ideas here. These might be getting a little outside of the most commonly used approaches, but depending on your content, you may want to show content on slide layers. Notice how there's no grouped objects showing up right here. And that's because we have a slide trigger that is showing the slide layer, right? Layer is called title 4 when the timeline starts. So it creates the effect that that grouped object is present on the slide when the slide first loads. Then when we click the button right here, we're just going to say hide title 4. So I placed the text objects here inside of the slide layer. Everything is displaying in the same place as soon as the timeline starts. Let me preview this real quick. Right? So the timeline starts and we automatically show that's that title 04 slide layer. Click the button and now we can hide the layer. Another option, if you want a little bit of an effect, is to add a motion path to the grouped objects. And yes, you can add motion paths to a group of objects. You don't have to add it to each individual object. So if I look up here in my animations tab, we have a, let me minimize this a little bit. We have a motion path that is moving from the starting position down here to off the slide, but we're triggering it not when the timeline starts, which is the default or built-in behavior, but we're going to use that, we're going to trigger that animation when the user clicks the button. So we're moving the item on that motion path as soon as we click button 5. And that's what we saw here. I don't know if you caught that when we first previewed it, but so we're starting right here and this object has a motion path, but it's waiting for us to fire that path by clicking the button, and then it shoots off the slide that way. And then finally, we're going to do the opposite of what we did here. Well, maybe a combination of the first one and the fourth one. And that is, instead of changing anything here in the grouped object, when we click the close button or the hide button, we're going to show another layer which has that another cover graphic on it. So this way we can one by one add cover screens or cover slides that appear above the base layer objects. One thing you need to know if you're going to do this is that for the slide properties, you need to override the default. So by default, we have the visibility set in Storyline to hide other slide layers. If you do this method and you have multiple slide layers with cover screens, then this will automatically hide all of them when this layer is shown. So deselect that, and then we'll automatically only hide that particular slide layer. All right, there you have it, 6 ways to hide and work with grouped objects in Storyline 360.